Hey there, Red Riot Youth. Mikey here, and trust you guys are all well. And here we are again for one of our midweek sessions, and we're currently doing a bit of a mini-series called Deconstructing Doctrine. And you might think that sounds really negative, but it's not as bad as it sounds. We wanted to take these big, beautiful, and sometimes complicated things of doctrine, what people believe, and words that we see in the Bible that sometimes are hard to understand. And we want to take it and deconstruct it down, look at it a lot more simply so that we can understand our Bibles when we read them and hopefully hear from God as we do. And so this week's topic we are going to be looking at is sin. And you're probably thinking, sin's easy. I know what sin is, and that's cool. But sin, the Bible teaches, actually started with two people called Adam and Eve. They were created by God and lived in paradise with one another and with Him. And God commands them, He says, you shall not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they do. And through their rebellion against God and what He had said, they now pave a way for sin to come into the world. And not only that, but as a result, also for all of humanity to sin and rebel against God after them. In fact, all of creation is affected by this moment. Since then, every kind of evil and tragedy and wickedness is a result from the sin in the lives of humanity. The evil that we see every day, the wickedness in our own hearts, the selfishness in our own hearts and in the hearts of other people is because of sin. So what is it? Let's zoom out for a little bit here. The Bible uses three main words that it's going to use to describe sin in many ways. The first word is sin itself, and that word sin actually means to fail or to miss the mark. The second word that you'll see that the Bible will use quite a lot is the word iniquity. And the word iniquity means crooked or crooked behavior. And the third word that you'll see the Bible use is transgression. And transgression means to break trust. And so what does this look like for us? Well, the goal was that human beings were made in the image of God. We were made to live in perfect relationship with God and with one another. And that was intended by God when He first made us. But when we sin, we rebel against God, the creator of all things, and we do our own way instead. That is how we transgress. We break trust with God and between people. We do this. Why? Because at our very nature, we are crooked. We have iniquity, which means we have crooked behavior. We are crooked. And when we do that, as a result, we sin. We miss the mark. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Sometimes, in fact, we are so crooked that we cannot even perceive when what we are doing is wrong and evil in God's sight. And that's why actually we need God's help to see that. That's why in the Old Testament, God gave His people the laws and the commandments to show to them actually what the difference was between what was good and what was evil. And the Bible is continuously reminding us that sin runs deep down inside of us. It's rooted in our desires, in our urges, in our behaviors, in our thoughts, and it's deceitful and selfish, and it actually controls us. That's why Paul writes in his letter to the Romans and says, actually, we are slaves to sin. David in the Old Testament also says something very similar, where he says, I was brought forth in sin. I was born sinful. Sin and rebellion to God, who is the source of all life, leads only to death. That's why the Bible describes our eternal separation from God as the wages of sin is death. It's a spiritual death, and we cannot escape it, even with our best efforts. Now, this is a lot, and the truth is that we have failed to be fully human as that God intended us to be. All that we do is crooked. We break trust with God daily and with people daily. We cannot even help ourselves. So what now? Good question. That's why the story of Jesus, or the gospel as the Bible calls it, which means good news, is such good news. He chooses to take responsibility for all of humanity's sin, past, present, and future, and put it on Himself. That's why Peter speaks in the letter of 1 Peter in the New Testament. He says, He, Jesus, committed no sin, and yet carried our sins in His body on the cross, so that we might die to our sins and live to what is right, or live to do what is right. Only in Jesus are we made right with God. We spoke 2 weeks ago, Daniel taught us about justification, and an easy way to remember that was just as if I had never sinned. Through that justification of Jesus, the salvation of Jesus becomes available to us, which is where Jesse spoke last week to us about how salvation is God's plan to rescue us from our sin. And how did he do this? He did this by dying on the cross and rising again from the dead. The power of sin over us is broken, and we are given his perfect and righteous life to live in perfect relationship with God and with others as we were originally created and intended to do. I trust that makes sense. There are some incredible videos by a group called the Bible Project that you can check out on YouTube. I would encourage you to do that. Have a great day, everybody, and see you soon.